Hello everybody, welcome back to another live broadcast of my reading of my novel Walking on Cinders. We're getting close to the end now, probably about 5 chapters or so left, so we might well reach the end by the weekend, we'll have to see. But now we're on chapter 28, and chapter 28 is quite a nice chapter because we're going to see the resurgence now of a character you might remember from very early on in the book. Here's chapter 28 of my novel Walking on Cinders. Arthur Bingham walked slowly forwards, careful to avoid the various debris which scattered the floor. This building was deserted. It had been for nearly a month now, the first location to see locally based troops phased out. Colombia, in the Americas, the battles here were over, and it was one of the United Army's greatest achievements, pushing the reformed enemy back to the coast and forcing a retreat out into the Caribbean Sea. Yes, the government detective mused, glancing from one end of the room to the other. It is definitely quieter. His mission here was one of intelligence, a seek and destroy task, or rather a steal and destroy task. He had been dispatched to search the former office of a French commando who had returned to London. He had been dispatched to search the former office of a French commandant and return to London with anything that he deemed to be suspicious. This was not a dangerous mission. Following the terrorist bomb plot which had struck the Strand and Arthur Bingham's subsequent loss of sight in one eye, the United government had been very wary to post him any farther afield than was necessary. He had been lucky to escape with his life that day and had since had a number of skin grafts. Nobody would tell Arthur who was behind the blast. He could rely only on his personal suspicions. Moving a little quicker now, his footsteps shattering the silence, he headed through a small archway and out into the open. From here he noticed the shell of an aircraft hangar that he had just left, the workplace of engineers and mechanics who had long since been redeployed or discharged. It was shaped like a half-tin can on its side, with large sheets of corrugated roofing and steel supports that jutted out into the open. To the left, a wall emerged from the side, the start of another one-storey building with a flat roof. Scattered along the exterior were a series of doors, one of which led to the French commandant's office. This place is spooky, Arthur thought, as he looked up and down the doors moments later. This must be the future. Thousands of empty barracks and airfields across the world, abandoned and silent. But things were not going to get any better, for the office he was about to enter had been deserted for much longer than the rest of the complex. In recent weeks, a rumour had been spreading from one United government to another. The French commandant that Arthur was investigating had shot and killed a man on his own side, whilst almost blowing the entire operation. Working undercover for Major General Sir Adam Dutale, the commandant was to collect information on a corrupt British colonel who was funding reformed offensives with money meant for the United front line. Trouble was, shooting down a United soldier to save himself meant that nobody was sure on which side the commandant's loyalties now lay. At last he found the door that he was looking for. Cast in thick metal and painted red, it was locked. But the detective had been given a key, and as he reached forwards to turn it in the lock, he felt the years pass by. As the door pushed inwards, Arthur focused on a name plaque just above the keyhole. Covered in the dust of a long time gone by, he rubbed it with the cuff of his sleeve and read the name with a smile. J.A. Babineaux. Yes, he thought, I am in the right place. The man was Commander Jean Andrew Babineaux, and he had travelled the world during his career. In the Americas, he had served for many years in charge of deployment and planning. In Colombia, he had befriended a number of high-ranking United officers and gained a promotion. Babineaux was widely known as the one to ask if you needed a favour. But when war broke out, he was suddenly transferred back to his native France, leaving everything he had worked on in Colombia far behind. Then Adam Dutale chose him as his undercover agent, and work began both in France and across the Channel, keeping tabs on Colonel David Smith. But Babineaux got close to the Colonel, and they found a likeness in each other. For a long time in the United government, they had had suspicions that Babineaux was working for both sides, fueling Smith's reform support, but at the same time reporting on these actions to Dutale. What happened in the battlefield provided the suspicions to be correct. It was Arthur Bingham's job to make sure that any evidence of corruption from Babineaux's service in Colombia was collected. The United government wanted to prove the Commandant innocent. They had enough trouble on their hands already. Inside, the room was surprisingly well preserved, and Arthur realised it remained exactly the way he had been left so many years ago. Before long, the detective was sifting through drawers and opening files. An hour passed, and then another, with Arthur Bingham unable to find any suggestion of wrongdoing. If anything, the documents suggested Babineaux to have a pleasant and approachable character, intelligent, conscientious, and good in a crisis. This will please the President, Arthur Bingham thought. After many long hours, the conclusion could only be made that Commando Babineaux was indeed trustworthy. It seemed his actions on the battlefield were down to a single lapse of judgment, and in any case, the truth would surely out once Smith was arrested. Arthur was a firm believer that a bad deed could be cancelled out by a good one. Commandant Babineaux would surely have defended his character, but if he could do it under pressure and without cracking, he would be all the better for it. So that's a very short chapter 28 of my novel Walking on Cinders, and tomorrow I'll be back with chapter 29 of the novel as we near its conclusion. Thank you for joining me. Really hope you're enjoying the readings that I'm doing from this book. Not too long left, and the story will come to its conclusion, so do join me tomorrow.